Now to breaking news on the Russia investigation. We'll get back to Irma in a minute, but the Washington Post is reporting tonight that Special Counsel Robert Mueller has notified the White House that his investigators intend to speak with 6 current and former White House staffers in connection with the Russia probe. The Post says that Mueller wants to speak with former Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, former Press Secretary Sean Spicer, and his team is also looking to interview top advisor Hope Hicks, who's the White House Communications Director, White House Counsel Don McGahn, one of McGahn's deputies, and a White House spokesman who works closely with Jared Kushner. Now, according to the Post, people familiar with the probe said the documents Mueller has requested strongly suggest the topics that he and his investigators would broach with the aides. And one of those topics is the president's involvement in crafting the initial misleading statement that his son put out about his June 9th, 2016 Trump Tower meeting with Russian nationals. The Daily Beast is reporting that Robert Mueller increasingly views that event as a, quote, critical moment in his investigation. Joining us now are one of the reporters who wrote that piece, Betsy Woodruff, politics reporter for the Daily Beast, and Jill Wine-Banks, former assistant Watergate special prosecutor and an MSNBC contributor. Thanks to both of you for being here. Betsy, let me just start off with the reporting from the Daily Beast, which says, in reflection of how serious the administration is taking the matter, sources tell the Daily Beast there are currently efforts underway to organize a legal defense fund for White House staffers. Such a fund would help cover the legal bills associated with Mueller's probe, which are expected to be large. A Washington white-collar attorney told the Daily Beast that everyone questioned by Mueller is going to likely need to retain counsel. Those lawyers will be between $500 and $1,000 per hour. Betsy, at some point, do any of these people fall under the umbrella, the legal umbrella of the White House? I mean, Don McGahn, the White House counsel, is one of these people who may have to get questioned. Their lawyers are not going to be working on behalf of the White House.
Correct. These folks are going to need attorneys who don't currently work for the White House. A source told me earlier today about outside counsel Don McGahn has retained. My understanding is that he didn't retain that lawyer specifically because of Mueller's queries into this probe, but he does have an attorney who doesn't work for the government, who works specifically for him. My understanding is that many of the other folks who currently could be facing imminent questioning from the Mueller probe don't yet have outside counsel and will need to retain new people. That's because, look, they're being questioned not in their capacity as government employees, but in their capacity as potential witnesses. And even for folks who Mueller is interested in talking with who are not suspected of any wrongdoing, the legal questions he's going to ask them, the requests he's going to make to them for documents are going to be complicated. And if they don't respond to those requests fully, it's something that could generate more headaches for them. Of course, an important piece of this is that these attorneys are very pricey to retain. I've reported earlier that Paul Manafort and Michael Flynn are both facing financial straits because of the sky-high legal bills that they've racked up due to the Mueller probe. It's a big piece of how this story is unfolding.
So, Jill, there are a bunch of things that this could be about, including the firing of Jim Comey and the decisions that led to that, including how the White House reacted to the information about Michael Flynn possibly being compromised by the Russians. But as you and I have discussed before, this June 9th meeting and the now 5 different responses that that Donald Trump Jr. has given to why he would have attended that meeting, this is a bit of a goldmine for a prosecutor. It's not clear where it ends, where it goes, but there are so many inconsistencies there that this was an obvious place for Mueller to start.
It is a very obvious place, and calling all of these witnesses is also the very logical next step. I mean, I've been reading that he's being very aggressive. I don't consider this aggressive. This is the normal way that you should investigate. You have some very obvious things that make people look guilty. And you've just mentioned, if you have 5 different choices, and you can't tell which one is correct, and not all of them can be true because they're inconsistent, you clearly have something that looks like a false statement. You clearly have something that looks like you're deliberately trying to mislead the prosecutor. So it needs to be investigated, and everybody should have lawyers. Donald Trump promised America that he was going to create jobs. I don't think he meant for the legal community to represent his own people, but that's what's happened.
The Washington Post is reporting that the then White House counsel Don McGahn speaks to Mueller that there's no attorney-client privilege. Betsy, there's the issue of attorney-client privilege, and then there's the issue of executive privilege that the White House sometimes has suggested it might use. Do either of these, can they apply here?
Those are complex legal questions, and I'm not an attorney, so I wouldn't necessarily be able to parse that. What I can tell you is that if Mueller is asking individuals in the White House to speak with him, it's because he's confident he has the right and he has a good reason to be speaking with those folks. I've done a lot of in-depth coverage of the folks who are working on Mueller's team, and they include some of the most sophisticated legal minds working in government today, including Michael Dreeben, who is on detail from the Solicitor General's office at the Justice Department and is arguably the most right expert living on the planet today when it comes to U.S. criminal law. So if Mueller is reaching out to these folks, it's because he's confident they'll be able to talk to him and they'll be able to give him usable information.
Yeah, it's interesting, Jill. The White House has not used executive privilege yet in this particular instance. Tell me about the executive privilege and the attorney-client privilege with Don McGahn being the White House counsel.
Well, those are actually fairly simple questions. The attorney-client privilege does not apply because Don McGahn represents the presidency, not the president. And he has to represent the people of America who pay his salary as much as the president. So it isn't considered an attorney-client privilege for him. And in terms of executive privilege, as we found out in Watergate, where executive privilege was invoked, it does not apply if the conversation is of a crime. And if you're in the process of committing a crime, it does not apply. So there are a number of exceptions to executive privilege that outweigh the executive privilege, which is a very important thing for a president to have. You need to be able to get honest, forthright advice that will not be impeded by the fact that you might have to disclose it. So I think it's an important thing, but that doesn't cover if you're committing a crime. And so that is why it wouldn't apply here.
Jill Wine-Banks, thanks as always for your analysis. Betsy Woodruff, thanks as always for your great reporting. Betsy Woodruff is with the Daily Beast. Jill Wine-Banks is a former assistant Watergate prosecutor, so she knows what she's talking about.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.